All right, so we're gonna be doing the validate phone challenge, just practicing our regular expressions. So first thing I want to do, fork. I sometimes forget doing that important step. All right, let's go through our motions, copy the URL, do a git clone that down, cd into that, and bring up the coding window. Over. All right, let's get started here. So let's take a look at the README, make sure we know what we're doing. Basically, we're going to be validating phone numbers. Let's check out Rubler. Cool, this should be helpful for us. Challenge, you'll be giving a list of methods you need to implement. All right, so we'll just take a look at the code here. So let's take a look at our spec file. So the spec file, as Tom mentioned yesterday, is written for us, so we don't need to write these test cases. But this is kind of going to guide us to actually what we need to implement. So let's take it one by one. I don't want to deal with all test cases right now, so I'm going to comment out all but one and do it one at a time. All right, so let's run our spec file and just see if our first test case happens to pass. I'll do Python, validate phone spec. All right, we got an error, unsurprisingly. So again, reading the terminal, not always the easiest, but we're expecting true, it looks like. We got none, which would make sense. So let's implement this method, has phone number. All right, so I'm gonna implement has phone number here. Does the string contain a phone number? So let's look at what the sample input was. My phone number is that. Now I'm gonna do something here that is not our solution, but obviously, one easy way would be, first we need to import RE, of course. Import RE, and then let's say, that should be a comment. Okay, so we need to create a regular expression to match this phone number. All right, so we're assuming the format will be 3-3-4. Let's try to create a pattern for it. And I probably would love to hear from you guys. So let's get you guys involved. What do you have here? Dan Miller, can you help me out here? So we need to create a regex pattern. And we need to do a match. So do you have any idea what the pattern might look like?
Yes.
So again, the inputs here, the first value for match will be the pattern, and the second value will be the string. So I can fill in the string, that's going to be input string.
So I think we did regex pattern equals, I might need Seth to help me out if I don't remember correctly, but \d, lowercase d, with a 3 in the curly braces, dash, \d with another 3, and then dash \d with a 4.
All right, yeah. So I think that's going to match this portion. So this is something I always had to look up, and honestly, I'm just going to look it up again because I always forget. There's a match, and there's also a search, and they're very similar in Python. I always get confused, so let's look it up. So docs.python, let's look for match. Okay, so it's a search function. The search function will scan through the string looking for the first location where the regular expression produces a match. Turn none. All right, so this is, again, this always confuses me. I kind of get annoyed with it, but so match will start at the beginning of the string. Search will search anywhere in the string, and I always forget it. So again, I'm looking this up just because I forgot what it is. So yeah, so I probably should be using search here, or I could use match and specify the stars here. Pattern. All right, so just to repeat that, so search will search anywhere in the string. So if I simply had the phone number matcher, which this should match it, I would agree with Daniel's regex here, that would match anywhere in the string. So in this case, it's towards the end of it. If I did match, I don't think would match this, because match reading documentation will start at the very beginning. So it's gonna look to match it right here where our phone number is not. To get around that, we could adjust our pattern to be dot star and dot star. So dot star, again, is just basically saying match anything, just take up all the space. As we mentioned, it's a greedy algorithm. So it'll eat up all of this, all these characters, because dot star will match anything. But then it'll match our phone number and then match anything after, if there were anything after. All right, so a couple ways to go about it. I think search is probably the way to go here. So I'm going to get rid of the dot stars. I mean, I could probably do this in, but
you're missing a D right before the 4.
oops, thank you. All right, so we're using search because that's going to search anywhere, and that's going to return something. Let's read the docs and see what that is. It's going to return a match object. But in this case, our function needs to return true or false. But let's return the match object, and let's print it out. Let's just see what's in this match object. I'm not sure if we get anything too interesting, but all right, so again, we're just returning a condition here, or sorry, a comparison, and this is going to be our true or false. Basically, if no match was found, match should be none, and then this will return false. But if match is anything that is not none, this expression should return true. So again, we need to return a Boolean. Looking at our spec file, right? It's checking assert true. So we're just assuming that has phone number is going to return true or false. Obviously, there's no documentation, but we are making an educated guess as to what we expect to return. All right, let's run this and see if that changes our test case. So I'll clear this, see Python, validate phone spec. Okay, we ran one test and we got an okay, we passed it. So great job. Thanks, Dan Miller, for helping out there. Notice we get a match object. So again, a match object is just an instance of the match class. A match class is something pre-built into regular expressions in Python, and it has some properties. So notice there's a span. And if you kind of look at there's 2 indices, and this is actually telling you where to start and stop, where that match actually occurred within your string. So if you happen to need to know like where to kind of start and stop, that span object should get you the details. Also tells you exactly what it matched. So let's actually change this. What if I changed and actually added the dot stars in here? Let's see what our match object will be in this case. So we still passed our test, but notice our span changed. It's actually matching the entire string. Starts at 0, ends at 29, probably non-inclusively. So it's matching this entire string, right? If I counted that, it's probably 29 characters. But the reason it matches everything was because we put in these greedy search. So it's going to, again, match anything that it can. And notice the entire match is in here. All right, so again, you can be as specific as you want. In this case, we just want to match a phone number. We don't care about extra stuff. So that's why we had that. And okay, so I think that achieves that task. Let's uncomment our next test.
Ankur, can I ask you about that span real quick?
Sure.
If we were to do match dot span, will that, and then could we access that? Is that basically like an attribute that we can access then, like of 0, and that would give us 0, or maybe of 1, and that would give us 2? I'm just curious.
Yeah, no, great question. Yeah, so looking at this, I believe span, this is a, what you can call it?
Tuple?
Tuple, yes, thank you. Yeah, so this is a tuple. Again, same thing, very similar to a list. I'm pretty sure you could do span of 0 and then span of 1. Again, this is assuming that we do have a match, so we probably need to check that, else we'll probably get some violation. But since we know we're getting a match, let's print those out. Oh, we didn't make a match. None type has no attributes. That's because the second test case that I uncommented. My bad. Okay, looks like span object. I am not accessing it correctly, so maybe it's not a tuple. Let's read about the span object. So let's take a tangent. It's always good to learn about more. So span object Python. Let's read about that. Okay, so Python regex looks like do span So we might need to call a function a tuple containing, okay, let's give that a try. So let's say we need to maybe do this. So I think span might be a function we could call. Again, kind of just looking at documentation and taking an educated guess. Okay, there we go. Yeah, so apparently span is a function that will give you a tuple back, and then you could access the values. So that was
Thank
my
you.
bad.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yep, again, always a learning journey. So I read documentation all the time. Hopefully you guys are getting comfortable reading documentation. But cool. All right, so that span object will show us exactly the indices we want. And again, we can use that as needed. In this case, we only need to return a true or false. So this isn't really gonna do much for us. All right, so let's test out our next test case, which is using the same function, I believe. And let's see. All right, so now we've kind of masked our phone number, so we don't have digits anymore. And the question is, will our regex here match it, right? So just taking another detour, what if we had W here, right? I believe W is our key for any word, so letter, number, or underscore. So hypothetically, if that were our regular expression to start off, we probably still pass our first test case, right? So we still passed it, but now it's always good to check, like for testing, again, going back to our testing methodology, always good to check like a false case also to make sure that you're not accidentally getting false positives. So if I ran this now, will I match? Nope. Notice I got an error. So we still matched it. We got a true. And that, again, that's because I changed this to /W, which will match any characters, any alphanumeric characters, which are these X's will hit that. But if we, again, go back to Dan's regular expression, which seemed perfect for us, let's try running our test case now. And there we go. We passed it. So we appropriately match numbers, but we don't match something that looks like a phone number, but not quite. So this should not match, and it did not. All right, cool. Let's move on. That's 2 test cases down. How many more do we have left? Looks like 5 more, maybe 6 more. All right, let's uncomment the next test case. And it looks like we're using another function here. So get phone number, when you call get phone number with a good phone number, you should get the phone number back. All right, so get phone number, we need to actually retrieve the phone number out of that. So this is where I think the span object is going to be useful. So I'm actually going to copy our pattern from up here, put it down here, and then we want to return the exact match. So assuming we have a match, again, always useful to check if a match exists. You don't want to try using something without testing it. Because again, there's no guarantee match is going to have something useful in it. Might just be none. So if it's not none, we want to do something extra with it. We want to return. I think we could just slice up our string. So let's do input string and match. Let's get our span data. Span equals match.span.
Can you just use match.group 0?
I don't think we can, but let's actually, you might be right. Let's check out groups. So normally you have to add parentheses here for a group, but maybe by default the first item will be let's take a look at that. So print group, and the 0 in here. So again, by default, I think I might need to read documentation, but James says this should work. You'll get a group automatically assigned for the first thing you match. Now, usually groups are delineated by parentheses. So if I wanted to match like the last 7 digits, I would create a group by putting parentheses around there, and I should have access to something called group 1.
The match object groups in Python don't quite line up with what regex calls them, and it makes it really confusing.
All right, so let's take a look at this, see what we're getting. Okay, so we got our phone number, but it looks like it works. So again, let's actually take a look at, I don't know if this is shown here, but the match object. Yeah, so I guess, again, by default, and again, this is reading documentation, there's no magic way to know this, but it seems like your first match will be in group 0. And so just talking about groups more, as I talked about, let's say we only want to capture the last 7 digits. Well, how do we go about doing that? Well, that's where we put in parentheses, and that's going to create additional groups if they match. So group 0 should be the full match. Let's try to access group 1 and print out group 1. This should be group 0, I guess. Okay, so notice in that case, I'm printing out group 1, and that only printed out 7 digits because I created another group here. You can create multiple groups. I believe you could create groups within groups. So let's try doing that. And not even sure what will happen here, but so now we have, I believe this should be group 1. This should be group 1. And then inside of that, I think you could have nested groups. So this should be group 2. Let's verify that or prove that I'm lying. I know. Always doesn't hurt to check. Okay, there we go. So we captured the middle 3 numbers by adding a group within that group. So group 1 should still match these 7. Group 2 is matching only the 3 in the middle. And then group 0, again, by default is the full match, which is all 10 digits. So, all right, so grouping is really useful, especially when you want to make a match, but you don't want the entire match back. Another way to do this, so again, the way James mentioned, definitely handy is probably the easier way to go, but we can use that span object that we talked about. So I did span and got that from the match, match.span. Not that span, just to see it, but then we should return when we slice up our string. So input string, and I agree. I agree that James's method was probably better because this is doing a lot more.
If you do want to do it that way, I was looking up span, and then right before that in the docs is start and end, which will kind of probably grab that a little bit easier.
Like this?
No, just match.start instead of span.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, so it's probably using the first group object there. But again, multiple ways to do this. I'm just going to leave this as is. But yeah, notice we get our span object 25 and 37, and then we still pass our test case. So yep, either way, let's put in comments. We could also do match.group 0, and that should get the same thing. All right, one thing I'm noticing here, so we passed test case 3. Let's see, let's try test case 4. It's still doing the same function, get phone number. So let's see if this passes or not. Okay, that still passes. So I think we're doing pretty well. We got 4 more test cases. We're halfway done. But let's take a look at this. Does anyone comment on ways I can improve my code right now?
I have a suggestion. Maybe for these first 3 functions that we did, they do share the same pattern. So maybe you could just make it like in the global scope.
Yeah, I like that idea. So again, we're using the same regex here. I don't think it hurts to create just some, say, phone pattern and create that one point. Because again, let's say, we need to change it. Let's say we're dealing with some non-US phone numbers. They may be formatted differently. It'd be nice that we only had to change it in one place here instead of changing it in multiple places. So yep, I think that is a great suggestion. Thanks, Brandon.
And then also for the second function, you can make a call to the first function.
I like that idea, but I'm actually going to reverse it. So I think my first function should call the second function because my first function only requires a true or false, but my second function actually needs that match object. Right. So in this case, but yeah, I like the idea. Again, the whole idea of reusing logic, having that single responsibility principle in place. So in this case, I'm going to switch the order of these. And I think I missed something. So in my first function, notice we have this if statement. This if statement will only return something, will only return like something we want inside of here. By default, if we don't specify a return here, like usually you should be explicit. You should be clear what you're returning. If you don't include this, by default, it's going to return none if you fail to have a return statement in all cases. But it's always good to be explicit. So I'm going to add that return none. All right. So
Hunter, is that a Python thing?
yeah, Yeah, I believe it's a Python thing.
Oh, that's
Other
really
lang-
cool. I didn't know
other
that.
languages, about what, the default return?
Yeah, the default none. I didn't know that.
Yeah, again, if you don't have it, again, all functions will return none if you don't have any return value. But again, I like being explicit about it, so it doesn't hurt for clarity. All right, so going off of Jason's idea, yeah, we should reuse this logic we have here. So I'm going to call get phone number. That's that. And then that should return something. So let's say results equals that. So if we get a none back, that means we didn't find the phone number within the string. If we get something that's not none, we could assume that the match was found. So we'll just check results. All right, and let's get rid of some of these comments so that, now our function is much simpler because we're reusing logic. And this is something we've been preaching kind of over and over. Try to, cut down on your redundancy by seeing what you've done before and reusing that rather than kind of rewriting it or recreating the wheel there. So we made modifications. Let's make sure our test cases still pass. There's no guarantee. I might have broken something, and I did. So
In the call, you didn't actually pass the parameter.
Yep, good catch, good catch. Thank you. My mistake there. All right, there we go. We passed the test cases. Looks like we're printing something out that's ruining our output there. But yeah, again, reusability. Always have an eye out for that where you're attempting to reuse code so you don't have to write as much. Okay, so halfway through, let's keep it going. I think we're making good time here. So get all phone numbers will be our next method we want to do. So get all phone numbers. Let's try to do this. All right, gets and returns all phone numbers from an inputted string. And let's look at what our example string is. So here we have 3 phone numbers that we want to extract. Let's put that in the comments. And let's go to our phone a friend. Let's see, who do I want to chat with? I feel like I've chatted with a lot of you guys, but someone, let's ask Yaping. Yaping, could you help me out here? Oh, not sure if Yaping's.
Sorry.
Okay, there you are. Okay, cool.
So the pattern is same, and we can use find all method.
Okay, I like that idea. So Yaping mentioned a new method. Maybe I'm not familiar with it. So again, documentation. Again, you'll be reading documentation. So hopefully get in the habit of it. So again, I'm in the python.org, the regex library. So this has a whole list of items I could be using. Again, shortcuts, you use re.ascii when you want to match ASCII characters, case insensitive. Again, there's a whole lot here. Obviously, we did not go over all of it, but this is something that hopefully you guys can go through as needed. So Yaping mentioned a find all. So find all, there we go. So let's read about it. So return all non-overlapping matches of a pattern in a string as a list of strings or tuples. The string is scanned left to right, yada, yada, yada. Result depends on the number of capture groups in the pattern. If there are no groups, return a list of strings matching the whole pattern. Okay, so it looks like this seems like something we use. Input still pattern and string. We could specify optional flags. So again, this is using a default parameter. If we don't specify any flags, meaning like, ignore case or ignore, spaces or white space, this by default will not use any additional settings. So good suggestion, Yaping. Let's see how this works for us. So we re find all. We have our phone pattern that we created above. So we have to reuse that. And then our input string is our input. And then let's say matches, because we might get more than one matches, right? Now let's print out matches and just see what it is. Let's just run our test case. We'll probably fail it. All right, so where did we print it out? So notice this is what we get for our output. It seems to extract all the phone numbers, right? Because we had 3 phone numbers in there, 234, the 350, and the 123. So cool. It looks like find all did what we wanted, but we need to return that. So I think we just do return matches. Is it that simple? Maybe. I don't know. Yep. All right, so looks like find all is gonna, as again, this returns a little something different. So find all returns an actual list or tuples versus when we did a find, or sorry, a search returns a match object. Sorry, I'm just trying to find the match object here. Yes, match returns a match object. Oh, sorry, this returns a match object also. So again, if you want more details on match object, you guys can read about it. There's a group function that we were using. There's groups also. So if you have multiple groups, again, a lot to it. Read documentation and educates yourselves as needed. Okay, so that seems like we achieved our task. Thank you, Yaping. All right, let's keep going. So we finished 5 test cases. Let's try number 6. You can call get all phone numbers with no phone numbers. You get an empty array back. All right, so we're looking for the false case where we have no phone numbers in our string. Let's see what happens. Clear this, run that. Cool, passed all 6. 2 more to go. I believe the last function is a little more challenging, but I believe we can get through it together. So when you call hide phone numbers, it hides all the phone numbers. So given input like this, we want to hide the first 6 digits and return it. As it looks like, does not look like it's a list. It's just gonna, I think, substitute in X's for those parts. And then the last, I guess the last one we'll do, that's the last. All right, so hide phone numbers. Let's implement that method. All right, so the input's gonna be something like this. That's our input. And our output needs to be the same string, except we need to replace a few items. So we're going to look like that. As I'm kind of typing this out, let me see what phone a friend number I can call on now. Who hasn't talked to me recently? I feel like there's someone that probably hasn't chatted with me recently. Let's go with Jonathan Ray. John, I know we've talked, I think maybe just yesterday, but I enjoyed our conversation. Let's continue it here. Can you maybe help me out here and suggest some ways I could achieve this task with regular expressions?
Sure. Me and Zach used the sub method.
Okay, so that's a new method that was just mentioned here. Let's find it and kind of give it a scan. So sub, return the string obtained by replacing the leftmost non-open occurrence of pattern and replacing it with some value. So basically this is going to take in 3 inputs instead of 2. The pattern, so we're going to try to find something. Once we find the pattern, we want to replace it with something, and then our input string, as always. Notice we have additional parameters. I'll read about those if we need them, but I don't think we need them. But again, we have some examples we go off of here. So let's see. In this case, they're matching dashes and then replacing it with dash. Sorry, I'm not even sure what this is doing. So it matches something and return. Okay, so it looks like it's replacing all dashes, I believe. If that's, it's gonna be exactly 1 or 2 dashes and replacing that with spaces. That's my guess here. But anyway, yeah, sub method. I think that is what we want to use. So let's do re sub. We want to find pattern, and then we want to replace it with something. So let's say RPL and our input string. All right, so how are we going to replace only these 6 digits, right? We're going to match the entire 10 digits, but we only want to replace these 6 digits. So Jonathan Ray, do you have some thoughts here? How can we first match this, and then how do we replace?
We actually matched, this might not be the best way to do it, but we actually matched like 3 digits dash 3 digits using the backslash lowercase d that we already used and
Gotcha.
the 3
So
in the curly brackets.
D3, like this?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's a good attempt, I'd say, but yeah, I would say that's going to give some false positives, right? So what if we had, this as our input? Well, these aren't phone numbers, but it's still going to match them and replace them, right? So a good thought there, because we do only want to replace these, but again, we don't want false positives, as in we only want to replace phone numbers, and in our case, phone numbers are going to be exactly 10 digits. So we might need to modify our thought process there. So I think we still need to use our phone pattern. which I meant to type here. But we need to replace it smartly. So this gets a little tricky, but this is where capture groups come into play. So I think I might actually need a new pattern. So let's do, let's call it pattern for lack of imagination. And it's gonna be very similar to this up here. In fact, I could probably update this, but I'm gonna choose to create a new pattern. I'm not sure why. Maybe I will change course later. But in this case, as we talked about earlier, we want to create some grouping. So we want to match the entire thing. That's why my pattern includes the entire, phone regex. But in this case, we want to also match a smaller group, right? So this is going to kind of let us target somehow only these 6 digits. So let's just take it piece by piece. Let's print out, let's say if r.match pattern and input string. Again, I'm just trying to make sure we are getting the values we want. So let's say match equals that. I want to do search. Actually, I want to do find all. All right, and let's print that out. See what happens. Print matches. Let's leave this stuff out. Okay, obviously we didn't pass. Let's see what we got for next. So again, we are able to kind of target only those 6 digits. So notice our list only has those 6 digits, but we need to now replace those 6 digits with something else. So yeah, does anyone else have some insight here? So we are able to extract them. How do we only replace these 3, but still keep this part? That might require some reading. So again, I happen to know, because again, I've worked with regexes, but there's an idea of back references. This is something that, again, we maybe didn't introduce yesterday, but again, hopefully you guys were able to Google and kind of understand that it is possible to use back references so that you can reinsert part of your match. So back reference, basically, is that what I want? I think that's called back reference, but yeah, basically you're trying to target something from your original match. What I mean by that is I can do something like, let's create a group around this portion. All right, and then I don't think that's going to change our matches. Oh, so we get a tuple back. So now we have 2 groups in here. We have the first group and the second group. So now we are able to kind of find the second part of our string. So we're going to need to retain that, right? Because we don't want to mask this portion. We want to mask this portion. So now that we have that, we should be able to create a replace string somehow. So how would we go about doing this? Let's see. I'm not sure if find all is necessarily what we want. Let's take a look. So I think sub is going to replace every occurrence. So we do want to use sub. We get our phone pattern, which is this. But now we have groups that we can reference. So our replace string is going to be kind of weird. Replace. Call it replace with. All right, so we want to create a regex here also. So what this is going to do is use matching groups. So I think we want to do /2, is it? To match the second group. Again, this might be, again, kind of new, because again, regexes are new to a lot of us. But what I'm tending to do here is saying, all right, we have 2 groups, group 1 and group 2. I want to reinsert group 2 right here. So whatever we matched, right, the second part here, I want to reuse that. But again, it's not going to be the same for every string, right? We have 3 different phone numbers. For the first string, it's 1422. Second one is 0744. So I just want to take whatever I match here and reuse that for my replacement. But then this is going to be hard coded because match only that. This is going to be hard coded because that is explicitly what we want to replace with, is that XXX, XXX. So again, my syntax might be off, but let's give this a go. So basically, we're matching something, replacing that, whatever we matched entirely. So this entire match, we want to replace it with this. And that's going to be, the first 6 digits have X's, but the last 4 digits are retained via that back reference. All right, let's give this a try. We probably want to return something eventually, so let's return think this is non-destructive, so we need to get a replaced string. Let's see. Return the string obtained by, yeah, so again, this sub's going to give us a new string. This is a non-destructive method, meaning input string is not going to be modified. So let's get replace string and return max. Or I could just return the result of this, but doesn't hurt to break this down. Any questions? Definitely want to make sure we're not losing anyone here.
I'm a little confused about line 40. Should we be passing line 40 matches instead of input string? Since that's where I'm a little confused, right? Because we're using matches to, or are we not using matches anymore?
I think, yeah, we're not using matches anymore, so that's my apologies. I was just using that just to see if I could actually create multiple groups, but yeah, sorry for that confusion. So let me comment out matches or just get rid of it entirely. All right, so I'm using pattern here, not film pattern. I have that error, but we're still failing our test case. So, okay, so we passed it now. So notice what got outputted. That is exactly what we wanted. So let's talk about this a little bit more, because again, it's not super obvious what's going on here. So again, we created groups, and that's the key thing here. I know I introduced kind of grouping during Sandown yesterday. Tom might have talked about also doing regex, but groups are really powerful, and this is something that hopefully you guys kind of get used to. You can kind of create as many groups as you need to get individual pieces of your entire match. So this entire regex pattern is what's going to be matched. So that's going to match everything, but sometimes you don't need everything from that match. So that's why you create these subgroups via parentheses. So now I could say first six digits, that's group 1. Second last 4 digits are going to be group 2. And the reason I need that, I need group 2 because I need to replace that. I need to reinsert that this portion of that phone number back in my replacement, right? And that's going to be dynamic. Obviously I can't just say 1422 because that's only going to be applying to this particular instance. But I have other instances. Again, I could have any combination of 4 digits there. Was there a question up there?
Yes, that was me. In the last example where you used groups, you had group 0. So in this case, is group 0 just the whole thing, the whole pattern?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. Good question. But yeah, so by default, group 0 is going to refer to this entire match. So if you need the entire match, you have it available via group 0. There won't be a group 1 or 2 if you don't add these. So if I actually try to do this, I bet I'll get an error because when I try to do back reference 2, there's no second group that it can find. So let's see what happens. Obviously, I won't pass this test case. But yeah, notice I get invalid group reference 2 at position 9. So here reset, again, this is the syntax you got to use. And again, reading documentation will hopefully make this more clear, but /2 in your replacement string is going to say, all right, give me group 2 back and reinsert whatever that was right here. So this is kind of like a variable that says whatever group 2 is in your match, put that back in here. But since I didn't create a group, notice I got an error saying, hey, we didn't find your group that you're trying to tell us to use. So I can even do this. So in fact, I don't need group 1 here because I don't care what these digits are. I just need to match them and then replace them with this. So in fact, I could just get one group and maybe save myself a group. So now I've created group 1, which is the last 4 digits. That's one we'll reuse here. So modified our solution a little bit, but there we go. So we pass the test case. This is our output. Cool. Let me get rid of the print statements. Yeah, so sub, again, very useful, especially want to replace a lot of things. So, you know, a lot of you guys did assessment 1. I've seen some people use the sub method where, and this kind of cleans up your code. So the special case in assessment 1, or one of the special cases, was converting penny to pennies, right? You can't just tack on an S. Like you can tack on an S for dimes, quarters, bills, etc. But pennies was that special case. So one solution I've seen, and it was kind of creative. Again, we did not expect anyone to use regex for assessment 1, but if you happen to know it, great. So in that case, what is it? Yeah, so if you had pennies, basically what you do is you take your value. Sorry, I'm switching gears here. Okay, so value equals plus S. So value will be your denomination. Sorry, I know I'm kind of switching gears here totally. Basically, a student kind of did this. So you get pennies, right? out of that if you were dealing with pennies, but then they used the sub method to replace any occurrences of pennies, and they changed it to pennies. So again, I thought that was pretty cool. It made the code much cleaner because they didn't have to special case this part. All they had to do was search their final string, and if they see any occurrence of pennies, automatically switch it to pennies, and that got them around it. So I thought that was pretty cool. Good usage of regex there. Again, not required, but a good tool. All right, so that completes that one. Let's get to our last one, and probably the most challenging one. Okay, so let's take a look at that one. Give me one moment, sorry. Sorry about that. Have something going on in the office here. Okay, let's take a look at our last one. So when you call format phone number, it formats all phone numbers. This one, I believe, was the hardest one. So hopefully you guys kind of squeeze your minds a little bit, push yourselves, and we're able to solve this. So the issue here, and this is again something Tom talked about yesterday, was that when you have like a form, there's many formats that we kind of are willing to use for phone numbers. Like we use parentheses sometimes for area code. Other times we kind of just throw all the digits in there. Usually we separate digits into 3, 3, 4 chunks with either periods or dashes. But again, all of these are possible for phone formats we might encounter. Now the question is, how can we call this method called format phone number and kind of standardize our phone number? So this is kind of like a real world application where users will have any old format. We want to standardize it when we're saving it to our database. So, let's say, this is going to be our standard format. We should be able to accept anything and then convert it as needed. So that's going to be our final function. Let's see if we can do this. So I'm going to call phone a friend again. Who looks like they are willing to help me? Anyone want to step up here? Seth, I saw your hand pop up. Let's do it, Seth. Okay, so we want to format phone number. This is going to be an interesting pattern. We can't simply use this because again, all of our phone numbers are not going to be standard format, but we might be able to use that for our replacement. Okay, Seth, what ideas do you have here for the pattern that we might need to develop?
So the pattern that I created was grabbing 3 groups. So it's going to be pattern equals, the regex expression is going to be /uppercase D.
Okay, could you tell us what that does? What is uppercase D?
So that's going to take care of anything before the digits. I was running into an issue where during the formatting, I think with the parentheses, that it was skipping anything with the parentheses. So
Okay.
It was just skipping straight over that. So this kind of allows for any digits before the number or any like non-digits before
Gotcha.
the number starts.
Yep. So this is in another character class. If we take a look at our cheat sheet here. So lowercase d is any digit. Uppercase D is going to negate that. So anything that's not a digit. So that's what Seth is using here. All right, cool. So we're going to start with non-digit.
Yep, and then we're going to enter our first group that we're going to try and capture, which is /lowercase d with a bracket 3. Okay. So we're going after 3 numbers.
Okay.
Then we are going to enter back into the /uppercase D with a star, which is going to say, hey, it doesn't matter. Any type of non-digits in between this and the next start of the next digits.
Okay, let's try to write this out because it's going to be complex. We're going to say non-digit first, and then we're going to group 3 digits, and then we're going to just add pluses here, and then this is going to be any number of non-digits. Okay, cool.
Mm-hmm. And then after that, we're going to repeat the first group. So we're going to just capture the next 3 digits.
Okay. Cool.
Then we're going to repeat exactly what we did with the D star. And then we're going to capture 4 digits.
Capture 4 digits.
Yep, another bracket.
Yeah.
Just a 4.
Sorry, I just had a brain pause there. All right.
Yeah, the reason why I chose this one is because it's like, hey, if somebody enters in like a whole bunch of spaces or hits like a period, it doesn't matter as long as there's a 3, 3, 4 with digits, it's going to capture that all together.
Okay, cool. So we're targeting 3 digits, and 4 digits, but then we're gonna buffer it with anything that's non-digit. All right, so let's kind of go through our examples here. So we have dashes here. So basically this \capital D star should capture that dash and kind of get rid of it for us. And then that should be the same for the period, spaces. Okay, let's see if this goes for us. So we're gonna need to replace this with our phone pattern. Well, we need a new one. So we're gonna use sub again, that new function that we just used. And we have our pattern. We're gonna input. And what's our replacement gonna be?
Replacement is going to be another pattern. So it's going to be another regex pattern. It's going to be \1 for the first group,
Yep.
dash \2 dash \3. So it'll just grab the numbers and then insert a dash by itself.
Yep, again, these are targeting the groups we created. So this is group 1. That's what \1 is going to refer to. Likewise, group 2 is \2. And we have a third group, which is going to be \3. All right, cool. That seems promising. So replace with, and then our input string. And that's going to return our replaced string. But let's take a look at our spec file, make sure we return what we need to. Okay, so we return 1 string, so that should be fine because that's what sub will return. They gotta be comma separated, so that is something we will probably need to deal with. Or is it taking the commas from here, or do you think we just need a comma separated? Probably from our inputs. So I guess it doesn't really specify. So let's just comma separate it. I'm not sure. My question is, again, it's ambiguous. I think if we had like periods here, should we retain those periods? Like, would the output here be period? I don't think so. I think there's always gonna be commas, but that's just I guess.
I think it already gives you commas in the return string.
Oh, well, I think that's because we have commas here. I think these commas are being retained. Is my guess, but I'm not sure. Let's actually take
You're just replacing the phone numbers.
All right, let's take a look at that. So if I print out replace string, and we'll have to return replace string eventually. Okay, let's take a look, and hopefully we pass our test cases. All right, so we failed because I have extra spaces here. So the output wanted spaces, and I don't have spaces. So it looks like I probably need to reinsert something here because I think these are eating up spaces also. So I think the easy way around this, again, I'm not sure if we need to retain exactly what was separating the phone numbers, or if we can just automatically insert commas and spaces. So here I'm just going to put a comma and a space. I think that's the easiest way to maybe solve it. But the last item is going to have a space in it. I have another way to go about this, but yeah. So in this case, we ended with an extra comma and space. So I'm going to use what can I use here? I guess a cheaper way. This is not best practice. Like I would not be fully happy with this, but we could kind of trim the string. So we could do return and slice it. So we could slice all the way up to -2. I think that should achieve it because again, I know as a developer that I'm adding an extra comma and space at the end. So I can kind of chop off that extra comma space. But honestly, this doesn't make me feel great because I'm kind of hard coding it. I still didn't pass. Why didn't I pass? I'm inserting it. What's going on here?
You're not matching that comma. And so the comma is staying in the string in the first place. And then you're adding another comma along with it.
Oh, okay. I thought this star D would match it. Like this would match
No,
it.
because there's no star D after the fourth or the third group.
All right. What if I change it to this? It's getting kind of really okay. So that fixed it. So it's going to capture everything. I think the reason this might have worked. Let's take a look at our input string. I think that worked because we start with only a single parenthesis. But if we had like multiple parentheses, I don't think that regex would necessarily match. But I might be incorrect about that. Okay, so that's one way to do it. Again, I'm not fully happy with kind of adding something and then chopping it off. Again, but we were able to solve it, so that was task one. I'm trying to think how I might kind of go about this. So I think I would capture the entire group. Again, I'm just thinking on the fly. So Seth, yeah, thank you very much for that suggestion. I think that's a great way to go about it. I'm going to create a giant group out here, and then I'm going.
We actually saw, Lily and I saw this problem where we, instead of putting the slash capital D, we actually said the beginning of any phone number would only be either an open parentheses or a plus. It wouldn't be anything else. So we just put that in square brackets and then put a question mark behind it.
Yeah, I think,
That way-
so you said you did.
Open parentheses plus, yeah, and then a question mark.
Right, so question mark means exactly one or zero appearances. Yeah, so I guess, yeah, for Seth's example, I did have an open question of, sorry, what if like, is this a valid phone number? Like if I have an X in there. So that's an open question, right? Like usually you don't have like an X in there, but in this case, Seth's regex will match that because that's a backslash capital D, which is a non-digit. So that would be valid. In fact, like if you had like a whole bunch of garbage in here, like this would match. Now I would say that's probably not a phone number. So we probably want to be a little more granular here. So I would say, again, my suggestion would be probably only match periods and dashes between numbers instead of just anything. So I'd modify Seth's solution here by maybe doing a period or dash or space, I guess, with a question mark. So again, we might not have any of these or have one of them. So yeah, again, these regexes can get kind of really ugly to read. So I will probably, I don't know if we use backslash in there. So basically matching parentheses, perhaps we don't need a plus.
Ankur, could you, I'm sorry, could you explain what the question marks do? I didn't
Yeah.
make it this far and I'm just a bit curious on it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm also curious about the case where if there's not a space in front of the phone number, what if it's just like, it just starts with a digit? Does that still get matched then?
Okay, so let's break this up. So I didn't update my comments here, but this chunk right here is basically saying we could either have an opening parentheses or a plus or a space. So I probably don't want a space there, but we can have any one of these characters 0 or 1 time. So what that's saying is that will match something that is like plus 312 yada yada yada. Sometimes that is a format that is used for phone numbers, or we can start with a parentheses, which is for the area code. So the question mark just says you have the option to exist, as in 0 or 1 is what question mark is saying. So if you look at our cheat sheet, question mark, it's a 0 or 1 occurrences of A, where A is everything that's before it. So this block is saying you could have one member from this character class, parentheses or plus, or you don't need to exist. And so likewise, we're saying, hey, you could optionally have a parentheses after your first 3 digits. That's fine. Then I'm using question mark here saying anything that's valid separating numbers would be a period, dash, or a single space. So I'm saying, in my case, again, it can be kind of subjective. I could have 312 666 6666, or I could have some variation. I could have 312 period 666 period 666, or dashes, or even in this case, it's going to match something like this. Again, that's not a really great format, but at least we're kind of limiting our options. Like, again, I don't want to match something that has like an X between numbers because I don't think that's a typical format. But again, that is my thinking there. So let's try to mess with this, but wrap this up shortly. Bad character range. So we need to escape this, I believe. Regex is always fun.
No, use a backslash S instead of a blank space.
Is that for any white space, or is that?
It is for any white space. I don't know what the just a space is, but
Okay, I think this is getting close to what I want. So return string looks good. Okay, cool. Looks like I passed that. And so this kind of solved my comma issue. So the commas are being retained. Sorry, I always switched the wrong screen. So now our regex is a little more granular. So again, Seth, you had a great solution, but I think the problem with Seth's solution was this part was eaten up by the \D, so that when we got a return string, those commas were no longer part of the match. My regex, the updated one, will match only this part. Like it doesn't have that extra part after it, so this part is retained, and it's not, when I do a sub or replacement, that part doesn't factor in because that part wasn't matched at all. So I match this entire block, match into this entire block, and this stuff is retained. Oops. But yeah, again, a lot of fun you can have with regexes. Definitely, again, looking at this regex, not easy to parse, and they could get quite cumbersome to write and read. So, it's not the easiest language to kind of just naturally pick up, right? Looking at this, I know what it does, but if I were a newbie, I'd be like, wow, that's a lot of slashes and question marks, and I have no idea what's going on. But again, that's the adventure with regexes. Again, the more you use it, obviously, the more familiar we get with it. Important takeaways here, if you weren't familiar with it before, understand how to group within your match, and then understand the power of using back references. So this is again referencing part of the match, so you could replace exactly what you match, so you don't, you could have it a little bit more dynamic. Okay, so that was Validate Phone. Hopefully you guys had fun with it. Again, I enjoy regexes for like the problem solving, the puzzle aspect, but again, they can be frustrating also. So definitely fall into both camps there. Any remaining questions about our regular expressions adventure?
Ankur, I do have a question, somewhat unrelated, well, actually completely unrelated to regular expressions. On line 10 of this, I'm curious, is none not falsy? Like, does none not represent false, or does it?
I believe it does in Python. So I could simply do if match, and this should work also. Let's verify that by running our test cases. But yeah, I think I like being more explicit sometimes, so I'll usually compare it to none. Actually, to be honest, if we want to be full disclosure, in Python, the appropriate way to make this comparison is doing is. We haven't talked about this, it's kind of subtle, but none is a type. So you want to do with the is operator. So you want to know if match is equal to none. There's only one none value that exists. There's not multiple nuns, right? So you actually want to check the identity of match object. Again, we haven't talked about this. You don't really need to worry about it. You can do not equals, and that works. And then as I think it was Michael, sorry, I forgot to ask the question. But yeah, you can leave that off because none is falsy. So this would work just the same. Yep,
Thank
good
you.
question. Yep, no, thanks for your question, Michael. Anything else? I probably have some typos here. Input it has 2 T's, my bad. Or I didn't write that comment, did I? No, I didn't. But we need to clean that up. All right, cool. So that is regex. I'll commit this over break. But yeah, let's take a break. So it's 9:36. Let's take a good 9-minute break. Please be back by 9:45, and we'll talk about school interface 4.